Nigeria is back, said the new president last year when he took over the chairmanship of the West African regional bloc ECOWAS. He pledged to boost his country's influence after years of inward-looking administrations, economic malaise, and security challenges. I spoke about that with the country's Foreign Minister Yusuf Tuggar in a special conflict zone from the Berlin Global Dialogue. How does he see Nigeria stepping up its leadership role when it confronts a domino of coups on its doorstep, foreign powers positioning for influence on the continent, the conflict in Sudan, and citizens leaving Nigeria in the face of economic and security fears? Nigerian Foreign Minister Yusuf Tuggar, thank you so much for joining us on Conflict Zone from the Berlin Global Dialogue.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin in your region, West Africa. Your government aims to reassert its influence after years of inward-looking administrations, but you've had this domino of coups on your doorstep. In the Sahel, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, all falling to military governments. It's not going to be an easy task, is it?
It's not easy, but you have to look at the root causes of what we're facing today, the unconstitutional changes of government. They are a direct result of the failure of the EU Sahel strategy. They are a direct result of the bringing down of the Gaddafi regime in Libya. They are, of course, a direct result of trying to curb migration and the fight against terrorism, and the fact that Nigeria was not included in quite a number of these initiatives.
And with those factors in mind, what does it mean for you in actual practice? Because you're the big player in ECOWAS. This is the economic community of West African states. It's been key to your influence in the region. And now you have Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso not only withdrawing their membership from ECOWAS, they're also forming their own alliance, the Alliance of Sahel States. Your zone of influence is shrinking, isn't it?
No, it's not. We continue to engage Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and other countries. We don't see them leaving simply by pronouncing that they've left. There's a process. These countries are signatories to the ECOWAS protocols, treaties, agreements. So it takes time. And in the meantime, we continue with full-on diplomatic efforts. Don't interrupt me. I know you. I know you're fond of doing that. They keep, because I'll interrupt you too. They keep.
That's fair.
So we continue, and you have groupings even within the ECOWAS community. You've got the Mano River. You've got. We are part of the MNJTF, for instance. So there's nothing wrong with having such groupings as being part of ECOWAS. So it does not necessarily mean that they stand in conflict with that.
But ultimately, I mean, they don't seem as if they're interested in rejoining anytime soon.
Well,
or do you see the possibility of them rejoining in the next 2 to 3 years?
Ultimately, we continue to make these diplomatic efforts. We're making headway. It's a process. It's not an event.
When your president took over as chair of ECOWAS last year, he said the following, and I'd like to quote him. He says, he would not allow coup after coup in West Africa, and that you must not sit in ECOWAS as, quote, toothless bulldogs. Now, when we look at the situation in ECOWAS failed to make good on a threat to militarily intervene to stop the coup in Niger.
Because our primary concern is...
Let me finish. And then you lifted the sanctions. Then you lifted the sanctions that were intended to put pressure on the generals.
ECOWAS is the community
of West African states. Has ECOWAS become a toothless bulldog?
It's a community, so the priority is the people and not the states, not the system of government. And we will make rational decisions, just as we did. The threat of the use of force was one of several options, and that's the way it remains.
But you didn't make good on it. So the question is, how can you put a premium on peace and security?
Was that what you were looking for?
No, I'm
bloodshed
asking how...
and mayhem and chaos?
Absolutely
in the
not.
region? Well, so
absolutely
that's
not.
why we did not.
Well, I'm asking you, though, because you have
these... rational actors.
You have these
we looked
values.
at it, evaluated it, and decided it wasn't the best thing to do. And the diplomatic efforts continue.
You have these values, though, as ECOWAS, and I'd just like to highlight them.
We still have them. We maintain them.
Economic integration, but also peace and democracy. I mean, you really pride yourself as
Yes.
a nation in Nigeria as being
And
a
that's why
democracy.
we're pushing those countries to
How are you
continue
repositioning
with
ECOWAS
a
now for the
transition
future with that in
program,
mind?
transition
How can you...
back to civil rule, back to constitutional democracy.
Okay. Where do those values stand in the face of military coups?
They stand in countries like Nigeria and others that continue to uphold them. They stand with ECOWAS, and this is what we will continue to do. We are a democracy, and ECOWAS is the community of West African states. The priority, the focus is on the community of people. So we're not just simply to make good on what we've pronounced. We're not going to just embark on some sort of carnage and bloodshed just so that you would say, oh yes, they made good on their words.
I'd like to turn now to foreign influence, because we have seen foreign influence on the continent. And following the Sahel coups in Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger that began in 2021, we've seen those countries reorient their security partnerships with French and US troops to now Russia and its proxies. Russia is said to have this strategy of driving a wedge between ECOWAS to extend its influence and undercut the West. Is that concerning to you, and how concerning?
It's very concerning. In fact, external interference in general, having foreign troops or mercenaries or private military companies as a whole operating in the region, in the Sahel, is of great concern to us. And this is why we continue to make diplomatic efforts. It's been proven to fail when external forces try to come into ECOWAS to solve problems or to create spheres of influence. You can see what Nigeria was able to achieve in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, when it led ECOMOG, and restored peace there. There were elections, and they continue under democratic administrations. And this is precisely what we're also doing with the multinational joint task force that is succeeding in the fight against Boko Haram in the Lake Chad region. And the multinational joint task force is Nigeria, it's Niger, it's Chad, it's Cameroon.
We're going to get to those security issues in this conversation, but first I'd just like to ask you, because you were recently in Russia, you said that you had an interaction with Foreign Minister Lavrov. Were you given any assurances? You said that you essentially reiterated the importance of unity within ECOWAS. What did the Russians have to say?
They told us that they are fully in support of peace in the region.
Do you believe them?
Well, I'm a diplomat.
So no.
We wait to see.
What's your biggest fear
what is it
when
the
it comes
Russians
to Russia
say?
on the continent?
Doveryai, no poveryai, trust but verify. So that's what I do.
And what do you make of what you're seeing?
Well, I'm watching, and we continue our diplomatic efforts.
Spoken as a diplomat. You have
responded as a journalist.
Yes. You have said that your position, and I'm hearing it here as well, is one of strategic autonomy, and that you work with all countries. So how much pressure, though, are you under to choose a side?
We're not under any pressure because countries know not to pressure Nigeria.
We see countries splitting into blocks, right? They're splitting into blocks over Ukraine. To some extent, they're also splitting into blocks over the war that we're seeing on the continent in Sudan that's raging. How difficult is it for you to maintain strategic autonomy?
It's always a challenge. Governance as a whole, diplomacy, being part of the international community is always difficult because as a student of international relations, I know that the international system is an anarchic one. Countries fight and vie for their national interests. And because of that, it's not a cakewalk. So we're not expecting it to be that way. No country expects that.
We mentioned security challenges a little bit earlier, and I'd like to hit on that now because there are still attacks by groups like IS and Boko Haram, and kidnapping for ransom is a huge problem in your country. For example, this year, and I'd just like to highlight a number of incidents, gunmen have abducted at least 150 people in Sokoto State, 287 students in Kaduna, 200 people in Borno. How can citizens trust your government if you can't provide the very basic needs for security?
You're from New York. How many people get shot in New York?
Well, we're talking about Nigeria.
Well, I want to, I'm making the point that, when you try to highlight incidents, you nitpick on every single incident and highlight it. And you've never even been to Nigeria. You just told me you've never been to Africa. So this is stuff you're getting from the internet. So, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is all that is going on in Nigeria. In your country, the United States, one of the candidates of the leading parties for the presidential elections was shot at. Does that mean you highlight that and just write off the United States of America?
I'm just asking you what the majority of Nigerians are saying. And here's some polling that's coming out of your country, and it says that the majority are of the opinion that you're not doing enough to curb kidnappings. Is that a fair criticism?
You can focus on the negative if you want and create a narrative out of it.
I want to hear what you're doing.
Or you can focus on the positive. So we are a country of 220 million people. There will be acts of violence, there will be conflict, but we remain a deliberative democracy. We're making rapid progress in our nation building, in development, and majority of Nigerians live in peace.
It's been said that extreme poverty, especially in rural areas, has made it easy for jihadists to continue recruiting among frustrated youth. Boko Haram has been described as still being extremely powerful.
No, that's nonsense. Utter nonsense.
Okay.
I don't know where you're getting that from. I know you get all your information
from the internet. So you stamped out the group?
Because you've never even been to...
You've stamped out the group?
Completely degraded.
Have you been able to stamp out Boko Haram?
You have cells of Boko Haram that still operate, but it does not mean they don't control any territory. Okay? And so to describe them as that is utter nonsense.
Well, it's been described as a terrorist group.
You need to check other websites. This one that you downloaded from is the wrong one.
Okay, well, even if you're able to reduce violence in your country, how are you going to keep it out? Let's look at the region more broadly, okay?
Tackling poverty.
Analysts have said...
security. Focus on the things that we're doing, that this administration is doing, on tackling poverty, on food security.
Analysts have said, for example, I want to look at one aspect of this, because analysts have said that the coups in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have largely led to an increase in violence, like transnational terrorism,
due to the failure of the
EU Sahel
strategy, due to the collapse of Libya,
but how big a blow is it to tackle
and light weapons? So we're having to deal with it. The G5 Sahel, Operation Barkhane, that Nigeria was not a part of, in comparison to what we were a part of, which was ECOWAS, that we led, successfully resettled Sierra Leone, resettled Liberia, and which we're doing with the Multinational Joint Task Force. That's Nigeria for you.
I'd like to turn...
You know what they used to call us? The Ghostbusters. That was Nigeria.
Another potential flashpoint for your security, and I'd like to turn to this as well.
I thought you were going to talk about potential flashpoint between you and I on this stage.
We don't have any flashpoints. We're having a constructive conversation.
Okay, good.
Another potential flashpoint for your country.
And thank you for not over-interrupting me this time around. I think I've flipped it. Go on.
Fair enough. Another potential flashpoint and I'd like to talk about another potential flashpoint for your security, is the conflict in Sudan. The former Prime Minister, Abdallah Hamdok, says that he fears the civil war is, quote, fertile ground for the spread of regional terrorism. And do you share that fear?
I do. Not only that, I share the fear of the repercussions Nigeria because we have about 8 million Sudanese of Nigerian extraction. So we have our largest diaspora in Sudan, which is why, sometimes we wonder why, there's so much hue and cry about migration and Nigerians living in Europe or other parts of the world, because Sudan is our largest diaspora, and it goes back in history because of the pilgrimage to Mecca on foot, on horseback. Historically, you have a lot of Nigerians in Sudan. So that is why we're getting involved. But unlike other countries, we took our time. We know the terrain. That's why it's always good to work with those who know the environment, know the terrain. We did not want a situation where we get involved and then we're deemed to be taking sides in the conflict. We truly want a resolution to the problem.
So where does your foreign policy put you on this conflict? Because, for those who are not aware,
you haven't been
the
checking,
conflict is catastrophe.
You have not been working your
the UN
internet
warning of famine, aid being blocked, reports of violence against civilians.
If you had been doing your searches properly, you would have seen that only last week I had a meeting with the Sudanese foreign minister on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly.
So how do you see Nigeria's role then in potentially brokering a solution?
Mediatory role, and using the platform of the African Union.
Okay, because we have seen these diplomatic efforts. We've seen diplomatic efforts on the part of the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. We've also seen...
You said U.S.
Yeah, we've also seen regionally. We've seen EGAD, for example, Egypt.
We are right there. I just finished telling you that we have history with Sudan. We understand it very well. In fact, a lot of Nigerians are Sudanese, or a lot of Sudanese are Nigerians. So that's why it's always good to work with those in the neighborhood. So
are you making news here right now? Because, and I just want to say,
you're trying to make me make news.
One analyst from your country has said the following. He says that no other country in Africa has what it takes to fill this role to help build the prospects of a lasting peace in Sudan. You're going to be playing a greater role in brokering a solution?
What did the other analyst say?
Are you playing a greater role in brokering a solution?
Of course. We are. It's not news. We've been saying it.
So we can expect perhaps talks sponsored by Nigeria?
A bit more. Or, better yet, please visit Nigeria. Visit Africa for once.
I want to get final... What do you make of the play, though, for international, the international power dynamics? Because this is a complex conflict, right? There is talk of foreign involvement. The UAE is accused of backing the paramilitary rapid support forces, something that they deny. Iran and Egypt are arming the SAF. Russia is said to be playing both sides, deploying mercenaries. How much of an impact do you see this involvement having, and how concerning is it to you?
Of what impact? Of Nigeria's involvement?
Foreign involvement.
Foreign
involvement in the conflict.
That's what's exacerbated the situation, made it worse. And that's why when a country like Nigeria, if you look at Nigeria's approach, the reason why it commands a lot of respect and deference on the African continent is we are non-threatening, first of all, to our neighbors that are much smaller than us. Okay, and it's clear that over the course of history, we do things purely out of altruism or for the better interest of Africa. That's why a lot of countries repose so much confidence when we come in as mediators. It's happened going back to the 60s and 70s. Chad, when we were working on resolving the conflict in Chad. We had the Chad conferences in Kano, northern part of Nigeria. You wouldn't know, but when you come to Nigeria, I'll take you there. Sudan, we've mediated there in the past. And that is why Nigeria, don't forget that Nigeria is the only country that has a near permanent seat in the African Union's Peace and Security Council. There's a reason for that.
I'd like to get a final thought from you about the play for influence in Africa a little bit later, but before we go, and I understand you have limited time, I must ask you about the state of the economy. Your government vowed a reset of Nigeria's economy. Instead, it's been described as the worst economic conditions in Nigeria in 3 decades, inflation higher than 30%, food costs, official statistics.
You're working
inflation
your internet again.
is higher than 30%.
You said, oh,
inflation
by the way,
is higher than 30%.
we have the worst. No.
Your president has just, and this actually happened yesterday, he just asked for patience.
There
he gave
go
a
off
speech
again on the
asking
internet
for
and,
patience.
you know,
do you really think Nigerians have time to wait?
They do. Nigerians are very patient, very understanding, and they see what the government is doing and how much progress we were making with our macroeconomic reforms until a company like Binance came along, a cryptocurrency exchange, and sought to undermine those macroeconomic reforms by allowing for money laundering through their platforms, which affected our exchange rate and in turn became a major setback for the macroeconomic reforms. But we're addressing that, we're coming back to that. I see you're quite eager to say something.
Yeah,
Please
tell me a little bit more about the protests, because I mean, you have had nationwide protests. You had them in August, you also had them again this week. The ones in August.
Why is it that whenever there's a protest in Nigeria, it gets overblown?
Well,
we
because
are a deliberative democracy.
Citizens are asking for a reversal of some of your policies. Exactly. Exactly, and that's what I would like to ask you.
And so I don't know why.
How high is the risk
a protest
that the
in Nigeria,
pain?
oh look, there's a protest in Nigeria. The whole roof is going to cave in.
How high is the risk that the economic pain
believe it or not,
shake people's foundation, though, in that
democracy? Believe it or not, we are a democracy. Same way that you have protests in your country, the United States, same way that you have protests here in Germany where you live, we also have protests in Nigeria. It's a deliberative democracy. People are allowed to voice their opinions, and they have freedom of association. They have freedom to express themselves.
And
so it should not be different.
Yeah.
Simply because
but the way
Nigeria,
that they are
because
expressing
it's an African
themselves,
country, or
especially
because it's
young
the largest
people.
black nation, therefore, oh look.
Yeah. Just one very quick question, and then we have to go. And I'd like to ask you about the future, the youth, because you've talked about the demography in your country and how you have such a strong young population. But a lot of the youth are saying and are leaving the country.
There's actually this term.
There's
it sounds like those commercials where they say 9 out of 10 doctors said this or that. A lot of the youth.
Well, it's estimated that more than 3.6 million people have chosen to leave Nigeria over.
Which website?
That's your official statistics.
I know that, which website? Please?
That's your official statistics from the government.
Which website?
Quoted by BBC. That's your official statistics.
So BBC is Nigeria's official.
Are you concerned about the number of Nigerians leaving?
About the number of Nigerians leaving?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are, which is why we're having the reforms, which is why we are embarking on what we should have been discussing, what we've done in terms of food security, what we've done in terms of inclusivity, the social investment programs, the infrastructure development that is taking place in Nigeria, the special economic zones. This is what you should focus more on, instead of just highlighting the negative.
Foreign Minister Tuggar, thank you so much for your time. We very much appreciate having you on Conflict Zone from the Berlin Global Dialogue. Thank you for the conversation.
As always, you've been so wonderful. Good to see you again.